Centuria is a manga that seemingly is the product of an unholy marriage between Seinen Manga cult classics Berserk and Vinland Saga, and the person who blessed such a union was none other than Tatsuki Fujimoto, the author of Chainsaw Man. So, if you like any of these mangas, I would probably suggest sticking around for this video. And also, did I mention that the author is a former Fujimoto assistant? There's a lot of unholiness that went into this manga, I'm not going to lie to you.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
Centuria follows the journey of a young man named Julian who was sold into slavery by his mother at an extremely young age. Now, as you can imagine, his entire life has been nothing but suffering, not only mentally, but also physically, and within his lifespan, he's never had anything valuable within his possession, because to be a slave means you are to be cast out the moment you are born. You are completely denied any honor and personhood. Slavery equal bad for the people in the back over there, but this story opens up finding Julian having stowed away in a ship, holding 100 slaves in the possession of slavers who seek nothing but ill intent for these people. Having been found by the guards on the ship, they decide to just quickly throw him overboard and be done with him because they have no feed to feed him, themselves, and the slave. However, the other 100 slaves object to this idea, protesting in favor of him staying. A pregnant woman by the name of Mea steps forward and opts to split her own rations and her own food with him, allowing Julian's passage aboard the ship. Completely taken back by this, the following pages within this chapter showcases just how beaten down Julian's life has been. It makes it very, very clear how disconnected this guy is from human emotions and just general compassion in life. He's covered in scars from his previous owner as a result of any mistakes made, and just generally for the slave's amusement. Julian is a kid who's wandered through life so far just not knowing the kindness of human compassion, and thus rather than sinking into the depths of vengeance as a result of his life circumstances like maybe guts or fortune, Julian finds himself almost numb to the people around him, to the people of this world, until he meets Mea, whose only guiding principle for helping Julian was that it lets her and the other slaves maintain their pride as human beings. And already there is a line drawn between themselves and these slavers. These slaves, as evidenced by Julian, are treated like nothing more like cattle, like lower than scum. They're looked at as absolute dirt by their captors, as if they aren't even human. And Mira's aim here is to just soldier forward despite her circumstances, to never stoop down to the cruelty of her captors. This, for all intents and purposes, is an alien concept to Julian. Julian, in return for this kindness shown to him by Mea, he sees a blade that she is carrying, and he learns that it was given to her by her husband a long time ago. However, due to Mira's circumstances financially, the blade has rusted and thus become unusable. Julian sees Mira's kindness as a transaction, as I mentioned earlier. His mind is just sort of broken and currently unable to just process human empathy and human compassion, and thus he refers to restoring this blade as repaying a debt, and this becomes a common theme throughout the series. As I write this script, I'm only 10 chapters deep out of the 40 ongoing weekly releases right now, but Julian is yet to move past this feeling of just constantly having to repay his debt to people who have helped him throughout the series. It's sort of like how he just views any sort of emotion going forward. Julian explains how he's never been treated with compassion before from anyone, not even his own mother, a woman who sold him at a young age, as I mentioned before, and walked away without even so much as looking back at him to see if he was okay. So, understandably, Julian may as well just be an emotionless husk. However, for all of this, this is a shonen manga, and Julian does have a drive to be a good person despite all of that. Now, as the chapter continues, we learn the obvious. Mea is pregnant, obviously, as I mentioned before. Now, this dynamic to me was very, very interesting. I feel like it's not something that you see a lot of in manga. Children being born and having to be raised, the trials and tribulations of parenthood, you don't really see a whole lot of in manga, not in any manga or any shonen manga that I've read myself. And it kind of struck home very close to me, having recently just become a parent myself. I'm able to sort of emphasize with Mea and Julian and the heart-forward trials and tribulations of being a parent and what it takes to take care of a child. It's a lot of hard work. So for the first time, Julian feels the child kick within Mea's stomach. As Mea tells him the baby is full of life, Julian just sort of stands there, dumbstruck at the miracle of what he has just felt within his hands. Unbeknownst to this child, who's unable to even speak its first words yet, is already teaching Julian more in these past 24 hours that he's learned in his entire life from Mea and just here. Now, the manga, as I mentioned before, goes out of its way to show Julian being alienated by humans and also just not able to perceive basic compassion and empathy, but it also goes out of his way to show Julian having examples being shown to him and learning this compassion and learning love and the warmth of a mother's arms, and most importantly, the miracle that is life and raising a child. But remember, this manga is a dark fantasy manga. It is what I like to describe an unholy union between Berserk and Vinland Saga, and it was blessed and ordained by none other than Tatsuki Fujimoto. So naturally, things don't stay smooth sailing for too long here. Now, earlier in the chapter, one of the crewmates tells the captains about cursed waters. Now, consider this that chapter's Chekhov's gun. A Chekhov's gun is a writing technique that you'll find a lot of if you look out for it, and it employs a certain detail early on within the story, and it lets the reader continue on and forget about that detail until later on in the story, bang, the Chekhov's gun goes off, and that detail becomes a very important detail to the plot. And, well, that Chekhov's gun is about to go off. After sharing a night staring at the stars together, Julian begins to feel, for the first time, some sort of semblance of normalcy, despite everything that's going on, despite being on a slavish ship. He and Mea are sharing a nice human moment, as Mea asks him to come and live with her. As Julian smiles, he says he'll think it over. Now, a storm hits and Chekhov's gun goes bang. The slavers are trying to decide how they're going to lighten their load for their ship in order to navigate the treacherous seas more easily, and the captain decides the slaves will be a nice way to do it. They've got to be the first thing to go. A slaughter begins on the ship, with the crewmates systematically killing the slaves one by one, all as they attempt to protect both Julian and Mea, who are, by the way, heavily pregnant. Don't forget that detail. 99 out of the 101 slaves fall, leaving just Mea and Julian alive. Now, as the captain monologues about how slaves are worthless and they're scum, the raindrops and the storm around them freezes midair as if time itself has stood still. Now, this is where the chapter takes a very, very dark turn into the sort of eldritch and dark fantasy type of genre, as a tentacled octopus monster I can only describe as this world's Cthulhu rises from the sea and asks both Julian and Mea, "Do you seek my blessing?" Terrified of the incomprehensible being stood in front of them, all Julian and Mea can do is just look on and pray that this is all some sort of dream. It's not. Now, the being stipulates: 1. You must sacrifice a large number of souls, e.g. the 99 slaves who just perished aboard the ship, and 2. You must sacrifice a pure love. Having had one of the main conditions fulfilled, the entity demanded one more be completed. Once the condition is complete, a great power will be bestowed upon the survivor. Now, I haven't talked about it yet throughout this video, but this artwork within the series is just nothing short of breathtaking. It is truly amazing, and it's consistently like this on a weekly basis. There has been many panels that have made me just sit back in my chair, rub my eyes in disbelief, and have to take a second look and a deeper dive into what it is that I'm looking at. And again, I'm only 10 chapters deep, and I'm very excited to continue reading on with this series. An impossible choice is born between Julian and the pregnant Mea. The two both want to live, and the two both want each other to live. However, Mea takes matters into her own hands, taking the very blade Julian had restored for her as a way to repay a debt of kindness to Mea. Mea now holds this very blade to his stomach. Now, if you looked at this and thought Mea was about to perform a homemade at sea abortion, then you'd be wrong, because Mea actually plunges the knife into her stomach and cuts out her child. Let me repeat that: cuts out her child. This manga is not fucking about, and now you see what I mean when I told you at the beginning of this video that this was an unholy union of Berserk and Vinland Saga, blessed by the psychotic Fujimoto. Now, having forcibly removed her child from her stomach, Mea telling Julian just how much she loves the both of them, she cast herself out to sea, giving one last smile as she plunges into the abyss. This eldritch entity, whose conditions have now been fulfilled, turns to Julian and asks him what he wants. He wants proof that Mea and everyone's life wasn't a waste. And as the being grants Julian's wish, he allows everyone to move, as we see Julian, whose eyes are now filled with this magic that we've never seen before, and he proceeds to rip through the entire crew in a violent rage. And as I mentioned earlier, the artwork, as always, is absolutely beautiful. 100 slaves, 100 life forces, their strength, their speed, their power, their endurance, and their reflexes, it was all combined into one and bestowed upon Julian. And the beautiful irony is that, as I mentioned before, Julian constantly feels like he has got to pay a debt to people. He's got to be working to finish off this debt. Maybe it's like a slave mentality. There's more going on here under the surface of Julian and his mental, but now it's up to him to prove that those lives who just sacrificed themselves to make sure he survived, they weren't wasted. He has to do something valuable with his life now, with the backing of their 100 lives. And to top it all off, those 100 lives will allow Julian to live 100 times. All of this happens within the first chapter, and I personally guarantee it will continue to get better. As of chapter 10, I'm not disappointed. I'm inspired enough by this manga to want to have made this video, and it's very rare that I take the chance and make random videos about manga that I've just read like this, but it was seriously a beautiful piece of artwork, and I highly recommend that everyone goes and reads Centuria. But anyway, that's everything from me. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Maybe consider becoming a member to the channel or support me on Patreon. Massive shout out to those who are already doing so, and I will catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love, big fucking kisses. Peace.